now some of these days.
Welcome back. I'm Michael. You are listening to The Michael Dresser Show. Gina Wilson with us, the author of Donald's Story, one family's journey through the tangled darkness of Alzheimer's. She grew up in Southern California, has an academic degree in history, communications, and law, currently living in Las Vegas with her two daughters, Sophia and Julia. Gina continues to be an advocate for dementia sufferers, and for those who love and care for them, while also balancing a career as a diversified entrepreneur and a life coach. Gina, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, and thank you so much for being here. You know, when we deal with dementia, there are so many people who have a concept of what it is, but it's more than just when somebody says somebody's got Alzheimer's and they can't think. It goes beyond that. It goes not only to the person that has the disability, but the family. Nobody teaches somebody how to be a caretaker. 20 seconds from now, somebody in the family could get hurt, they could become paralyzed, or any number of things can happen, and the next thing you know, you're a caretaker, and nobody taught you how to do it. You know, the disasters that can come out of it.
Well, that's exactly right. And with Alzheimer's, what I have found through our experience with our family and just talking with other people and my own independent research is that there is really a general ignorance about what Alzheimer's is. A lot of people just think, well, that's just something that old people get. It's just the same as senility. Or you'll hear even among professionals, such as people in the medical field who perhaps should know better, that they will not understand the symptoms. I mean, I can give you an example with my father. And this book is about my dad and my journey as one of his caregivers through his dealing with Alzheimer's disease. But one time we had to call 911, and the personnel who responded to that call, because we thought he was having a stroke, the young man was very, very nice, very kind, but my father at that time was in a memory care facility, and it was a lockdown facility for Alzheimer's patients and others suffering from cognitive impairment, and the young man had no understanding that he could not take what my dad said with a grain of salt. He wanted to interview him directly, and I kept saying, now he does have Alzheimer's, and he said, well, ma'am, I have to talk to him and ask him, do you have Parkinson's as well? And my dad said, yes, I do. Well, Michael, at that time, my dad would have said yes to anything. You
Sure.
could have asked if he were Santa Claus. He would say yes. And the young man proceeded to write that into his medical chart, and I had to stop him. And it gave me pause at that moment. I thought, boy, how little so many people know, or you hear people say things like, oh, well, my grandmother, she doesn't have Alzheimer's. She just has a touch of dementia. And they'll just throw words out without an understanding of what those words mean. And, I was the same. Part of the evolution of my book came about because we all had so many questions, and you're just grasping at straws as you watch your loved one deteriorate.
Sure. Susie Greenman, Radio Susie, her mom has got that same thing, so she'll talk to me occasionally about this. But the one thing that I did learn a few months back about Alzheimer's, and it was a little bit shocking, but then after listening to Susie for the last couple of years, I began to see it, because she'd come in and say her mother didn't recognize her, or her mother was living, in some other area in her mind. And from what I learned, and it was on an interview actually, from what I had learned about Alzheimer is they may not be in the same time zone that you are, because they slip back to different years. They could be 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or in the present. And you've got to be able to catch when they are to be able to relate to them, which is not easy to do if it's doable at all.
Absolutely. And another thing about that is you have to stop and look at the situation and wonder, and there are no answers to this, but you need to question as the caregiver, is it that your loved one at that moment is not understanding you or is in another place, or is it a deficit of communication? In other words, you've got two separate problems going on here. You've got a problem with cognitive impairment of losing actual memory and losing actual knowledge. as those neurological connections are blocked or deteriorate or die off. But then you also have the problem of, and there's a technical word for it, I'm not a physician, but where the patient cannot find the right word. They cannot find the right expression. So they will call something that it is not. And you're right. With my dad, in terms of the time orientation, sometimes he would be back in World War II. He would be back on that ship. I drove him past. In fact, that was one of the signs that I had that, okay, these little warning signs are something more serious than just aging. We went by the house that I had lived in and grown up in as a high school student, and we were on our way to visit a relative, and my dad became quite agitated, and he said, "Where are we?" I said, "Oh, look, Dad, look at our house. It's changed so much." And he says, "I've never been here before."
Yeah.
And he gave me pause, and I thought, okay, where are you? And he was back at another time. And you're right about that. It's a different reality. To me, one of the most important messages that I can share with other families going through this journey is that compassionate caregiving really means learning to what I call speak Alzheimer's. And what that means is you cannot orient your loved one to reality. Many times you'll hear people try to correct them, oh, no, the toothpaste doesn't go on your comb. It goes on the toothbrush.
Yeah.
Or no, Dad, it's not 1948. It's, 2013, 2014. But that's your reality. That's not the reality that person is living in, and that's not helpful to them.
No, and in so many cases, you go in, it's your mom, your dad, your significant other, you love these people, and they're in that strange world of theirs, and you could walk in and they can give you a nasty look, spit at you, and say, "I hate you." And it has nothing to do with you because they're not talking to you. But yet, in your mind, it's coming at you. So I think caregivers, and thank goodness I've never been a caregiver, but I think caregivers in and of themselves, there's got to be a place where they can go to learn how to do it. Somebody once said, which was interesting, who was had expertise in caregiving, she said, you got to learn how to move through these things. Let's say your spouse, you're a caregiver for your spouse. Well, 1 minute you're cleaning them up from the bathroom, and 10 minutes later they want to make love. So, it's that, how do you make that transition without knowing what you're dealing with?
Right, and it can be very frustrating because, again, sometimes it's sporadic. I mean, for example, with Alzheimer's and other related dementias, what you'll see sometimes is that person, like you said, they're having, but it could just be a bad moment. And then after that, I know for so long, so many friends of mine would say, well, there's nothing wrong with your dad. I don't see anything wrong with him because he would appear normal. He'd have a conversation with you. He'd put salad dressing in the spaghetti instead of the salad. It would just be. And so that's frustrating. And as a caregiver, you don't know how to make sense out of that. And there's not a lot of sense to be had. But because it's such an extended disease, it can go on for so very long, as it's often called the long. This can become really, really draining on family members. And the statistics, Michael, like you said, you're not a caregiver. But if you look at the statistics for Alzheimer's disease right now, there are 5 million estimated people suffering, which is supposed to triple by the year 2050.
Wow. Gina, are you on a cell phone?
She is.
Yeah, we lost her. Okay. Let's see if she comes back. Da-da-da-da.
She said she hopes she has good reception.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's Gina Wilson we're talking to. She's the author of Donald's Story. That's one family's journey through the tangled darkness of Alzheimer's. And we're moving through some of the things that happen with Alzheimer's that unless you've been exposed to it, you're just not going to know. And there are those blocks that come up, those things that happen that cause you to really have to take a look at yourself and think if there's anything wrong with you or not. There's been some cases where the caregivers really couldn't deal with it and have committed suicide. Oh, okay. We got you back?
You've got me back.
Oh, good.
Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. It happens to the best of us. But I was just mentioning that in some cases there are caregivers who will commit suicide because they are not emotionally strong enough to deal with it, and at the same time they don't know. When you get a parent calling you names, telling you they don't know who you are, for many, many people, Gina, that's just not something that they can deal with.
Oh, the guilt is terrible.
Sure.
It's an awful place to be in, to look at someone that you've grown up with, that you love so dearly, and who has loved you, and to have them look at you with hate and anger. And let me tell you, when my sister and I had to put my father into a permanent memory care facility, I mean, we had sworn we would never do this to one of our parents, but it was for safety reasons. He became quite dangerous because he was quite physically strong. And yet, at that moment that we did that, he was his normal, gentle self. And Michael, let me tell you, this man was just a Perry Como type man, that greatest generation, kind, gentle, warm Italian man. And the day that I had to permanently put him into a lockdown facility was because he had tried to kill my mother. I mean, it's just horrifying. And yet at the same time, you're just filled with guilt. He sat there and he looked at me and he said, "How could you do this to me? It's a dirty trick. After everything I've done for you, don't put me away," just begging. And it's, in my book, I talk about this and I relate so many of these stories that other people going through this will understand that there's nothing like it, because you are burdened with this horrible sense of guilt, but at the same time, you have to forgive yourself, and you have to think, if my father were in, he would tell me, "You're doing the right thing. Protect your mom, protect your children." He wouldn't want us to suffer because of him. And I knew that in my head, but it doesn't help your heart when you're going through it.
No, because you're still a human being, and no matter what happens at base, that's what you have to deal with. And I really believe that there are, you take like books like you have, Donald's story. For a lifetime of putting this book together, wouldn't it be great if you could save a life, help a life, that if it took them a couple hours to read the book, that they wouldn't have to go through all of the things that they would go through if they didn't know, they couldn't anticipate what was around the corner.
Yes, that's my hope. It really is. And that's what I try to do. Whenever I do a book signing, I have people around the table who just want to be heard. They just want to share what they're feeling, because it's a very isolating place. It's a 24/7 job, and it's a lonely and very unthankful place to be in. I mean, the statistics, going back to that, if you don't have long-term care insurance and you are forced to put your loved one into one of these facilities, the average person cannot afford it. And this is the fact of the case, that there are 17 billion hours of unpaid care delivered by family members each year because there's nowhere to go.
Sure.
And it's a very, very sad state of affairs. It breaks your heart, but at the same time, just imagine. I mean, my mom did this. She's 85 years old, and she's sitting there at home trying to care for this man up until the last moment when we had to make a different decision for her. But you're right. Caregivers need to realize that it's okay to reach out for help. It doesn't make you a failure. It doesn't mean that you're betraying your loved one to say, "I can't do this anymore. I need a professional." And in fact, that's actually what's better for these patients at a certain point in time, because it becomes quite difficult. And again, you have to be able to recognize that these things are disease. They're not personality. They're not your loved one. They don't hate you. They're not angry with you. It's disease.
Yeah. And by the way, Gina, we're just about out of time. Do you have a website where we can find you at and also find the book?
Absolutely. If you would like to purchase Donald's story, our Alzheimer's memoir, you can do so at barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com, or you can go into your local Barnes & Noble, and if it's not on the shelf, you can ask to order it in for you.
Wonderful. Go ahead.
Can be contacted at GinaWilson.com.
And by the way,
I really appreciate you having me on your show, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure. And if anybody missed it, it'll be up on our website. It's up on our website now. So your website and how to contact you for the book and everything will be up there. And by the way, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. It was nice speaking with you today.
Oh, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.